And thank you all for coming, actually, for what's been a really fantastic course on women's liberation. So really, the starting point is post-feminism, isn't it? You know, that's the start of the meeting. And I think a lot of people actually argue that we've made it now. We don't need to fight oppression anymore. We've absolutely made it. I mean, if you look at the statistics, I mean, there's a whole 5 women CEOs in the FTSE 100 companies. I mean, Hillary Clinton's entering the presidential race. What a victory for women everywhere. And we've got a whole 191 women MPs out of 650, by the way, you know, and astonishingly that is up by a third since 2010. But I mean, realistically, life is different for ordinary women too, for working class women. You know, there's increasing rights to paid maternity leave, and actually the introduction of paternity leave, however meagre it may be, it does offer some kind of flexible childcare options. I mean, there's the introduction of the minimum wage, you know, mostly done by women, you know, great. But the nature of anti-sexism's changed as well, actually, because, I mean, Jan just gave a fantastic, you know, potted history of the women's liberation struggle in the 60s, 70s and 80s, but it is different now, because quite rightly, it was pointed out that when you saw the wider labour movement was on the up, as was the women's liberation movement. But really, the flip side is true too, because when the struggle went down, when the wider class struggle went down, so did the fight against sexism. There was a significant shift as well in this time, because people they went from challenging the state and actually seeing this systematic oppression, they went from challenging that to actually focusing on personal attitudes and personal relationships with people, and actually seeing as oppression is maintained and sustained through these individual relationships, which actually has quite a serious impact on your strategy if you believe that. Now, it's almost 20 years since the great feminist the great feminist fighter Margaret Thatcher famously declared that there's no such thing as society. And I think this has quite a significant impact, really. You know, this ethos, it has quite a long-ranging impact on contemporary kind of organisation and politics. Because, like I said, activists who once agitated for an organised struggle against sexism, they're now saying that actually what we need to do is every woman needs to succeed in her life. She needs to go for the job promotion, you know, she needs to be able to be a mother and a worker and a boss and all these things. And actually that's the advance. When we get women to the top of society, that's the advance we need. And gradually over time, the more women we see at the top of society, the more sexism will wither away. And actually, quite often, you get the idea that when you get a new woman MP or a new woman CEO, or even, for example, when like a Hollywood star gets paid the same amount as a male actor, that this is a victory for women everywhere. It's absolutely, we've made it, everyone. But this is against the backdrop of austerity, where cuts to things like legal aid, cuts to things like the public sector and the NHS, is making the lives for ordinary working class women much harder. So it really is quite jarring, actually. And I think, like I said, since the 90s, because of these reforms and because of these ideas, it is suggested we're living in a post-feminist world, and we should just all try and be the best women we could be, because some have made it, so why don't we all? Is it because we're not working hard enough? I don't know. So it is this rise in this individualism, this focus on the individual, that has really shaped the women's liberation struggle during this time. Now, the hope, like I said, the hope that was spawned by these mass movements in the 70s, in the 60s, the hope, it was infectious. They really shook society, they shook the state when they marched against the Vietnam War, when the miners went out. But the disappointment, actually, that came after that had quite a serious impact, Because if you don't see changing the world through collective action, through mass campaigns, through struggle in that sense, where do you see it? Where do you see it? Do you see it on an individual basis? So activists went from trying to change the system to going into the state, to trying to reform it, to going into academia and trying to reform away the worst elements of capitalism. Now, alongside this idea, interacting with it, what we've seen over the last 20 years really is a hypersexualisation within society. And it was touched on briefly in the last meeting, but I'm gonna go into a little bit more. So this is called raunch culture or the new sexism. Now this comes out in different ways. In Britain, over the last 15 years, what we've seen is lap dancing clubs just spring up everywhere. There's one just over the road in Spearmint Rhino, and these are very charmingly called gentlemen's clubs, of course, where, you know, the gentlemen can go in and they can purchase erotic services, really, like a lap dance or a pole dance from women. Now this is significant because these attitudes have changed over this. These clubs, they used to exist in the back alleys, you know, they used to be, shady ventures really, but now they're on the high street. They're next to Greggs, they're next to WH Smith's. I mean, actually, they're like open all day. Like, it's just utterly bizarre. And they're really seen as legitimate forms of entertainment as well. I mean, just a few years ago in 2008, vouchers to a strip club were given out with official conference literature at the Tory party conference. Yeah. So there's buying and selling, and that's what it is, by the way. It's buying and selling of women's bodies and their sexual services. It's entered the mainstream. It's part of popular culture now, actually, and it has significant impacts. Now, one place you'll see this is universities, and it kind of got talked a little bit about in the last session, but I think universities actually are one of the places where you can see oppression, women's oppression at its most sharpest, especially about this raunch culture. I mean, honestly, I could talk about it all day. The list goes on and on of examples. It is absolutely disgraceful. Like, there's beauty pageants at universities now. When I was at university, there was a Miss UK contest, which had very specific ideas of what a beauty pageant should look like. You had to be under 25, you could never have been pregnant, you could never have done anything to bring the esteemed name of Miss UK into disrepute. So I think that rules probably most people in this room, actually. But you also you get student club nights. So you get pimps and hoe club nights, you get naughty nurses or sexy teachers, where you're encouraged to dress up as a kind of a sexualised version of an occupation. You get CEO and corporate hoe club nights, and it really is quite vile, actually. I mean, one student actually described it as, it forces women students into conforming to being sexualised while male students are not. And really, I couldn't have put it better myself. And what's really crucial, actually, is the imagery that they use to advertise these club nights. There's a very clear business model. What they do is they have women, almost naked at least, and they put them up in student unions. These are in our universities, and some are like women tied up. Some have got like duct tape over their genitals. It's absolutely vile. And I don't think this is a coincidence that this comes at a time when cuts to university funding is being made. I don't think it's a coincidence at all. Not to romanticise the universities of the past, but actually they've gone from being, places where people continue their education to somewhere where you're a consumer, you're a customer at a university. And the fact that they take on these club nights actually and put them up in the student union really says a lot. But this is crucial. There is resistance to this, and there is resistance on campuses as well. I don't remember if anyone remembers Dapper Laughs. What a guy. Dapper Laughs, a vile, sexist comedian that had 5 minutes of fame really last year. He, for those who don't know, he had a TV show where he taught men how to bully, harass and intimidate women into sort of going out with them. And he was due to perform at Cardiff University, and a group of students decided that actually they weren't having this. So they got him booted out of the Students' Union, which then kind of led on to a massive petition, and he got his show off the air, and he made a really grovelling apology actually on TV, which was quite good. But also, just down the road, the London School of Economics Rugby Society decided that the best start to the academic year last year was a freshers' fair to hand out literature calling women sluts and mingers, and interestingly also described King's College students as don't worry about them, they're all going to work for us one day. And they got their society banned for a year. But this isn't just confined to universities. I mean, I don't know if anyone reads Rolling Stone, the cultural American magazine. Of its 1,200 covers, women appear on just 244 of them. But only on 80 of them are they wearing clothes. Yeah. It's absolutely ubiquitous. But the early noughties, really, I mean, since the late 90s and the early noughties, what we've seen is the introduction of what's been called lads mags. So publications like Nuts, Zoo, Loaded, I mean, they have a very specific remit, really. They always feature naked women on the front or topless women, and they've got some lifestyle features, so stuff about car and sports and how to attract women. I mean, really, it's actually a very narrow idea of, you know, what men want to read about as well, I think. But this is, I mean, pornographic magazines, they're not really anything new. You know, Playboy and Penthouse have been going since the 60s. But this was a little bit different. There's something a little bit different about this one that separates lads mags. And that's actually the way that they were marketed, because they weren't marketed as pornographic magazine. They weren't marketed as distinct from popular culture. They weren't on the top shelf. They were on the middle shelf. They were next to, you know, I don't know, OK Magazine and Radio Times and stuff like that. They weren't seen as distinct from popular culture as a whole. But everyday sort of reading literature for the discerning young gentleman. But these lads mags, they don't happen in a vacuum. They're not really isolated incidents. They are a manifestation of this raunch culture, of this hypersexualization. But they also encourage it. Actually, they are an important part of it. And this makes the sexualization of young women absolutely the norm. I mean, I know one of the editors of it said that their circulation went up when they didn't put a celebrity on the front cover topless. They put, you know, the girl next door, just, you know, an ordinary woman. But the position of lads mags isn't static either, you know. I mean, at its height in 2005, Nuts had a circulation peak of 360,000 a week. But it closed last year because of low sales. It was a fraction of what it once was. And I think when we talk about things like lads mags, when we talk about this hypersexualisation, it would really be remiss not to talk about the advent of the internet and what a difference that has made. Because this has made a significant impact on how people view sex and sexuality through internet porn, you know, and how people consume that. Because pornography has fundamentally changed. It's changed from the occasional copy of Playboy, which you have to go out and you know, and buy and, you know, maybe read in secret. It's gone from something that's an occasional thing to something that is everywhere. It's online all the time, mostly for free. People can read it. People can watch it in their homes. I mean, also, it's a massive business, by the way. 68 million porn-related search requests are made every single day. It's more accessible than ever before. You can look at it whenever you want. People are accessing it younger than before as well. There's a statistic that 92% of boys see porn before they're 18, and 83% of young women see it before they're 18. It's really shaping people's especially young people, their expectations of what sex is like and what their experiences might be like. It's a massive business. The US internet porn business in 2012 was estimated at worth $1 billion. And it's not the case that it's tiny sort of back alley shops selling these pornography magazines or the internet like it used to be. These are huge multinational companies that are making these millions of dollars or pounds, because they're the ones who are benefiting from how mainstreamed pornography has become. And this drive for profit, the fact that there are these companies competing against each other to access this market, this has actually had an effect. This means that they're commissioning increasingly kind of extreme sexual acts to compete with each other, to get those customers to spend that money. Now this has an impact, not just on sex, but also on how people view themselves. Cosmetic surgery is massively on the rise. They're literally inventing new surgical procedures so people can look like the people they see on porn. There's a procedure called a labiaplasty, where you can create, the vagina that is favoured in these porn films. I mean, this procedure it rose 44% in 1 year. Buttock augmentation procedures have risen by 58% in 1 year. And actually half of the cosmetic surgeons in America perform these. They're trained to perform them. It's a massive business. And it's clear, I think, that we live in a society where women, particularly young women, are constantly sexualised. Women and girls are used to seeing women's bodies everywhere, naked in our newsagents, in our high streets. But they're seen as the object of sexual desire without any real sexual agency. But I love this. So last month, a new kind of beauty pageant was opened, because I thought we'd sort of got rid of those really. It was a new kind of beauty pageant, but it was called the World's Most Beautiful Vagina Beauty Pageant. Where this is not like the beauty pageants of old, where you actually saw at least a human being, even though she's in sort of swimsuit and she definitely wants world peace and all that. But it's actually a type of beauty pageant where you take a picture of your vagina, you put it online, and strangers vote for the most attractive one. And 1 million people have voted, from all around the globe. But it's the prize really that I think is the interesting part, because the winner wins $5,000, and they also get the opportunity to have a mould made of their vagina to be manufactured into a sex toy. So that's where we're at. This is clear objectification of women's bodies. They're completely disassociated from their sort of sexual organs and their sexual agency. In the past, feminist, socialists and others, we've picketed beauty pageants, rightly calling them a sexist institution. But we've gone so much further than that. They're completely disembodied sexual organs. But genitalia, it's more than that. It's become separated from the body entirely. But really, it's part of our sexuality. We should have sex because it's fun. Your sexuality should be somewhere where you derive sort of real pleasure and choice. Not something to be voted on by strangers so they can manufacture a product based on it so they can make a profit. It's absolutely disgraceful. And I have to note, there's not a world's most beautiful penis pageant, which I think is very telling. So there's a contradiction here. Well, there's a few contradictions really. There's a contradiction in that society is telling you lap dancing or pole dancing is the ultimate liberated act. It's the way to express your sexuality as a woman. But a study's come out that says universities would take punitive measures against any students found to be working in these industries. There's a contradiction here, because young girls and women are growing up in a society that completely sexualises them, increasingly actually, at earlier ages. Matalan was selling padded bras for 8-year-olds. And last week, a head teacher in a Staffordshire school banned girls from wearing skirts because it's distracting to male teachers. And actually someone made a contribution very similar to that. So it's quite widespread, I think. But there's a contradiction here, because the Tories have cut sex education. They don't want to arm young people with information where they can make informed choices and navigate their way through a really complicated and complex world of sex and relationships. They're completely denying them that right to receive that information. And of course, all through this hypersexualisation of society, this raunch culture, women are encouraged to see it's just a bit of fun. Join in with the banter. Show you're one of the lads. Don't show you're prissy or, a prude or anything like that. Women are encouraged to see themselves as objects of sexual desire, rather than having sexual agency and sexual desires and a sexuality of their very own. And previous generations of women have fought, historic and amazing battles against the objectification of women, and to be able to assert themselves as having this sexual desire. It was a core principle of previous feminist movements. But this is important because this raunch culture, this has actually assimilated the language of these previous struggles. They've co-opted it for their own. So it's liberating to go pole dancing. It's empowering to have painful and expensive cosmetic surgery to make your genitalia look different. It's you're going to achieve equality to go pole dancing and things like that. There's a massive business here. I was looking on a website for pole dancing classes, and they've got some really interesting testimonials from people. So we've got, I love my pole, every woman in the world should have one in their living room. And we've also got, there exists in every woman a hidden and erotic sexual creature. And you're told that the way to get this hidden and erotic sexual creature out of you is to pay someone to teach you how to spin around a pole. And I think it's worth noting as well that the women who work in these gentlemen's clubs, the women who work as glamour models, they have to divorce themselves from their sexual desires, from their sexual agency, because they're there as objects. They're not there as people. But sexuality is important. It's a vital part of our humanity. And actually, under capitalism, it's the spectrum of human sexuality is compartmentalised and it's commodified. It becomes a thing to buy and sell, to the point where only a minority of sexual experiences are profitable, and therefore considered desirable. But this raunch culture is sold back to us. It's sold back to us as very liberating and empowering, and it's persuaded us to be objectified in this way, in actually worse ways. The world's most beautiful vagina. But women's oppression has been repackaged. It's been sold back to us, because under capitalism, everything has a price, absolutely everything. And this rise of raunch culture, this rise of this hypersexualisation, and this objectification of women's bodies is part of the commodification of sexuality in capitalism. Because humans are social beings, and everyone's sexuality is something that is unique and important to them. And actually, the capitalists are making an absolute killing selling our sexuality back to us. Because we're told, actually, you can solve the problems in your life by going out and buying a porn film or a lads mag or something like that, or a sex toy or whatever. But because capitalism is a dynamic system. It's managed to sell this back to us. Now, it's important to consider, actually, that socialists do not attack this question from a moralistic standpoint. We do not line up with the Tories, who have a deeply reactionary agenda when it comes to women and their place in society and sexuality in general. We are against state censorship. We rely on mass campaigns to beat the sexist back. In the past, feminists have lined up with right-wing evangelical Christians to increase state legislation against pornography, and that is not the solution. Because the thing is when we've seen in the previous meetings, and actually all through Marxism really, that the fight against oppression is intrinsically linked to that of the class struggle, and there's actually no clearer case in this than that of the Russian Revolution, where women's material conditions were completely transformed. They were completely changed. They legislated for equal pay and for maternity leave and for the removal of the distinction between legitimate and illegitimate children. The Bolsheviks recognised the deeply oppressive conditions that women had previously suffered in Tsarist Russia. So they changed things. They collectively organised childcare. They collectively organised food. Women were taught literary skills that they were denied previously. Because it's not just about changing people's ideas, although that is incredibly important, but it's about changing the way people actually live their lives, the actual material conditions. It's about taking women out of the privatised sphere of production. Now, obviously, we don't live in Tsarist Russia anymore. Things have changed. Probably the biggest difference is the majority of women work now. 65% of 16 to 64-year-olds work. And actually, if you're a woman working in the UK, you're more likely to be in a trade union than a man. And it's our duty as revolutionaries to bring these questions of oppression into our workplace, into the wider class. Because Lenin said the Revolutionary Party should be a tribune of the oppressed. Because the fight against oppression and the struggle against exploitation cannot be counterposed. They are both essential in fighting for a better world. Because socialists are involved in campaigns today. Recently, this year, they came after the women's right to choose. They tried to attack abortion rights. And socialists were at the heart of the campaign, beating them back. And we won for now. And we must be involved in these campaigns and arguing for our tradition and arguing for a Marxist explanation of oppression. Because these movements, these campaigns, abortion rights, it doesn't happen in an ideological vacuum. People are constantly debating, who benefits from oppression? How do we get rid of sexism altogether? And stuff like that. We need to fight for ideas, maintain our independent politics, because we don't just have an idea of how to get rid of sexism. It's about changing the world altogether. That's what genuine liberation is, not equality under a sexist capitalist state, but genuine liberation for everyone. It's not enough equality. We need to completely change how society is ordered, because mass social upheavals have always brought the question of women to the fore. Because ideas aren't enough, legislation isn't enough. For women to achieve genuine liberation, we need to completely restructure the society altogether through the revolutionary process. Because it's this revolutionary transformation of society where the working class emancipates itself, but in the process completely destroys oppression forever.
I just wanted to ask a question that you sort of briefly touched on, and I've literally just bought a book on the subject in bookmarks, is how can we as socialists support sex workers when it comes to struggling to gain more rights as workers, because that's been starting to happen more around the world. And I'm not talking about sort of just okaying the entire industry and not the obvious problems that we know within the industry, but more as respecting them as fellow workers who are trying to gain fellow workers' rights. And how can we as socialists sort of find where our position is and help do that in the struggle?
I just wanted to say that the interesting thing for raunch culture, like for me as a socialist, is it shows like a flaw in how far capitalism has come, in that it's willing to commodify liberation, and it will tell us that we need to look a certain way, or be a certain way, and they have to have like a certain size breast. But like, if you went out into the street and it was really hot and you took your top off and everyone could see your breasts, that would be a terrible thing. So what capitalism is doing is it's commodifying something, but it also has to keep the image of a woman that is like, you know, sort of sedate and like sort of, you know, a good mother, a good role model to other people. And now it's got a crisis where it's become so commercialised that you're like saying to someone on the one hand, you need to look like this, but we don't want to actually like see it. And I think that that's an important thing to link the two things, the problems of capitalism and how it links oppression like together.
And the comment will be on
my name's Kieran, I'm from Tottenham in North London, and first of all, I'm not claiming at all that sexism doesn't exist or that it affects men or that it doesn't affect women more than men. However, it does also alienate men's sexuality as well. Like I'm a bisexual man. I think that if I'm not part of the group, I'm not part of the lads staring at tits, I'm somehow different and I'm really weird. This is not cool. It's very homophobic. Like I have previously gone, you don't want to know this too much maybe, but I've previously gone to a naked gay bar where it was very clandestine and very sort of, it was literally underground. People were very uncomfortable being there. I talked to a Jamaican bloke who didn't want to be there, but he wanted to be there because he liked sex with men. And if you're not part of the sort of group of people that enjoy objectifying women, it's very strange. But thirdly, I'd like to say I went to a meeting on sexism last year, and I got taken to point because I said that just like how white people might see racism, it's a separate question. So I thought women's liberation was a separate question to me that because I'm a socialist and I'm empathetic, I support. However, it's actually key to fighting the system that we live in, because my mum worked fucking hard. She was a single breadwinner in my family for a long time, and do you know what I mean? It's all part of the nuclear family. The way that society is structured is all very related to sexism, and thank you.
Yeah, funnily enough, in the notes I've just written for what I wanted to say, I think we have to recognise that the situation that Sarah's described actually oppresses men as well as, and boys, as well as oppressing women and girls, and that we have to fight together against it. Surveys of boys and young men, asking them about where they mainly get their sex education, the majority of them answer from pornography. And that is a very sad situation, because they're getting a very unrealistic, dishonest view of women and girls and what they really are. There's there's a documentary by Beeben Kidron about teenagers and their relationship with the internet, in which one of the boys that she talks to, he's quite open about the fact that he uses pornography every day, that he's pretty well addicted, and at the end he says, well, it's completely spoilt me for love. Yeah. And that is just such a sad situation. That is really sad. It is also incredibly sad that you learn that because, maybe as a result of pornography, maybe it would have happened without, a lot of young women actually shave off their pubic hair and use the trick. If they're going out and they don't want to have casual sex, then they don't shave, because that's easier than saying no. Now, it's absolutely tragic that we have young women who are not confident enough to say no if they don't. I do think we have to keep on revising our tradition. I'm sorry, we grew up saying whatever we wear, wherever we go, yes means yes and no means no. And maybe we need either. Maybe we need, And I do think we need the point was raised at the previous meeting about sex education. If boys are getting their sex education from pornography, what the bloody hell are our schools doing? What is the Department for Education doing? I think the answer lies in fighting for honest sex education, but also honesty. There was one survey done that's really interesting amongst Swedish teenagers, which appears to show, and okay, you know, the evidence tends to be produced by one side or the other, who appears to show that they have a very realistic, confident attitude towards pornography. Like they say, we know that when we're out driving, it's not the same as being in a car chase in a film. Yes. We know that real life isn't like pornography. That we want all our teenagers to be in that position.
Yes, I'm Anders from IS in Denmark. Just a comment to this about the pornography. There's also a survey in Denmark that's made about this that says that supports your claim, but also tells that when young boys engage in relationship, that also moderate them a lot. I mean, because they engage in relationship, but it cannot only be to the coincidental thing. If they come into a relationship, there should also be education in school and stuff. Actually, I wanted to say something different about all this focus on our bodies and pole dancing and stuff like that. I think it's something to do that we live in. We have a term for this. You live in a competition state, and it wants us to educate us to be the perfect workforce. People do CrossFit and do pole dancing to make these flexible, effective machine bodies that can carry on all the antagonism of capitalism, and that's our individual strategy. I work as a high school teacher, and we had a theme on food, and half of the women and some of the male students wrote about eating disorders. And I think it's to do because they have some kind of relation to this. Maybe not themselves, maybe their friends or something around them, but they have tried this. They can relate to this about the eating disorders, and it shows to me that if we don't have collective action and about how to make our lives better, it will be these individualistic strategies like fitness, pole dancing, fitness, CrossFit, and all these things. So yeah, we need a collective response to this.
It was hard with 3 minutes, 2 minutes. It's going to be impossible. But okay, I'll try. I wouldn't mind pole dancing if men will also keep take classes of it. I think it will be very interesting to go well. I just want to say there is a war right now in internet. There is a big war, and there is many kind of men and women belongs to main right activism groups called Amarais, and there is other groups called Boys for Men, and they are bullying many feminists and women that speak for for equal rights on internet right now. One of the small examples that we can find is that a month ago, Facebook changed his friend's icon, where usually it was a bigger kind of large man, and behind you could see a smaller woman, like a step behind, quite small. So this designer kind of changed. Sorry,
I'm tapping after one.
Okay. So this designer changed it and basically now put the woman in front, and she made the woman slightly smaller, but not as small as before than the man. And this has created absolutely outrage. Kids nowadays have seen a big change especially in teenagers, unfortunately, and they are becoming more sexist as the years goes by. And I totally blame internet, I totally blame media, I totally blame the music, the kind of music they listen. And there is very good kind of documentaries if you want to watch them. One is called Blur Lines by the BBC. Another is called Misrepresentation. It's an American one, really, really good. And they all talk about how the media is putting a lot of pressure on all of us, especially on the youth. But there is hope. And I'm going to finish with this.
Thank you, comrade.
There is hope. last year a big group was created called Gamergate. I'm very into video games. I'm very kind of, you know, all over them. But video games is one of the most sexist medias that you can ever find. Although I still love them, even if I had to roll my eyes, but well. So these couple of women kind of spoke out against this, saying, oh hey, you know, I think video games could be a bit different, it could be more inclusive, it could be not so threatening for women. And then some men and women.
I'm sorry, Carmen, I'm going to have to ask you to sum up.
So they create Gamergate, and they try to kind of bully everybody out of the industry, especially women or anybody that thinks. But right now, there's been this study where they say that most of teenagers, actually boys, are against this, and they want actually more representation of strong women, and they are tired of sexual representation of women in games.
You can speak loud, sorry, at the front, you'll go deaf. Probably, maybe. I want to try and answer that question that someone raised about sex work, because I know in the ISJ we had a debate about it, 2010 into a bit of 2011. I think socialists should, where sex workers are trying to fight for the rights, like more money, against harassment at work, abuse, you name it, slut, unquote, shaming, we should defend sex workers and we should stand by them and we should give them solidarity. I think the question is sex workers' job like any other? That's where I have a problem, because I do believe in decriminalisation of all forms of sex work, and I do believe that people of any gender should have the right to set up a brothel for themselves. I do believe where there's already existing lap dancing clubs, they should fight for better rights in them, but I'll be honest, I'm against opening new lap dancing clubs. I don't believe you should, I don't believe you can actually organise to close them down while they're already existing, because usually women are working there trying to make money, and we can't campaign in a way which kind of can be seen to be taking away their livelihood. So once they're already open, I don't think we can argue to shut them, but I think we should fight to stop them from opening, because I do think encouraging it kind of reinforces the idea that women are objects. So I think we should defend people's terms and conditions where they already exist in it. But I don't think we should be, say, in careers lesson at school, encouraging people to go into it. But just finally, this comes from the objectification. Sexism comes from the ideology of the family. Objectifying of women, the idea of defining women by their relationships to other people, how much they care for others, care for the man, care for the kids, care for the elderly relatives, not as individuals in their own right, as total human beings. And that's where the sexism is, what it's rooted in. So actually, get rid of pornography, you'll still get sexism. I think it deepens it, it reinforces it, but it doesn't create it, and I think that's where we have to start it. And some of this kind of postmodernist argument, which separates sex work from women's oppression, is completely wrong, because, you know, it's rooted in the objectification of women. So we have to go and challenge attitudes, we have to fight for migrants' rights, fight against poverty, and encourage where women can feel less made to do it, or whatever, or choosing to do it.
Hi, so my question will take me a lot of balls that I don't have. The picture that you showed was really good, and I still have the question, how do we fight for women's liberation today? And especially, one thing I picked up was, we have to maintain our independent politics. And now I have to ask a question that I can't not ask when taking the women's course, is that the party, the SWP, had a problem with sexual assault case, and that was in the media everywhere, and that's obviously something that comes into my mind when I think about today and how to tackle feminism, and what would it be like? Would a socialist new society, would it actually really change? Would it actually don't have any sexism if there can be these kind of things within a party that's fighting against it?
As a mother of an 8-year-old girl, I'm kind of like constantly trying to protect my child. As a mother of an 8-year-old girl, I'm constantly trying to protect my daughter's childhood. One from the schools who want to kind of test her and, you know, and train her, and also from the market, really. And to me, the porn industry, how that's got more and more kind of universal out there, that's one way of kind of like selling sex as a commodity. But the other danger is like the cosmetic industry seems to be targeting younger and younger girls all the time, and this kind of emphasis on
how you look. My daughter was invited to a 8-year-old daughter, invited to a 7-year-old girl's pamper party where it was makeup and everything. And she was on the website, so my daughter, to her friend, and her friend introduced her to this thing where you pick out clothes for this little dolly, and then she says, I'll show you how you do it wrong. And so she picked out these certain clothes, and then it said, he doesn't fancy you. So, you know, that kind of message to a 7-year-old, that a girl and a woman should dress a certain way. I had to go into my school at one stage, at my daughter's school, when she was in reception, and say, why are you playing that song, Gangnam Style, with the lyrics, you know, sexy lady in that? And the teacher there was saying, oh yeah, I did think we shouldn't do it because some parents might complain. Not that it's, you know, reinforcing sexism and that, and what constitutes what's sexy. Just briefly, I can't compete with the market and all those images as a parent. I can't do it as an individual, and it's not in a personal thing. The only way I can think about my daughter is to show her images of where women are strong, not where women are victims, but where they're strong, they're fighting back, and women and you know, girls can be into sports, they can be into science, they can be into maths, you know, they can be anything they want, and it's all about how we work together and smash the system. Not, you know,
Okay, I'm a bit nervous, but I'll be really quick. I just wanted to say that before I came here, I was a little bit more passive because I didn't really want to like express opinions at work, because I don't like that if you express your opinion when everyone else is, because it's contrary to everyone, they kind of turn on you. And I'm now starting to, because there's a lot of sexism, racist jokes and things like that at work. And usually you laugh it off, like the head chef once said, can you work on Monday? Oh, then I only have to pay you in bananas. And things like that. I mean, I'm so used to like laughing it off because I'm just like, well, what am I doing? You know, oh, it's only Neil, it's fine. But actually with the sexism and like the racism, like all this other stuff, I was wondering this whole day, like, how am I supposed to go back into work when usually everyone laughs at it? And I'm like, okay then. I'm starting to think, actually, I should just say no because it's very inappropriate. Yes. And if I'm seen as someone who's like wrong for doing that, then that's fine. Because I've had other instances where, when I was a bit younger, I was walking down the street and like a stranger like looked at me like at my chest. I'm walking in the high street and he stopped to actually look at my chest and then keep going. Then he turned around and did it again. And I literally wanted to cry in front of the high street. And I've never understood. I've had other instances like that when someone's tried to like looked at me a certain way when I'm only like maybe 15, and this is a few years ago. And I thought, I don't know why that happens, and why when you're walking down the street you can't be a certain way, or you have to see it as a compliment when a man kind of confirms that you're attractive and things like that. But I'm now starting to see that if you allow people at work or wherever to make certain jokes or to say certain things, you're only just making it worse, and you're not really fighting against it. And you have to start by saying no, so that you don't allow people like that where you think, oh, it's just meant in good fun. You have to just say no, like, it's not appropriate.
Just really 2 points, in addition to some of the discussion that's taken place today about why sexism is on the rise. And I think particularly in university campuses, student unions are completely different bodies than what they were in the 1970s, 60s, 70s, and even the early 80s. Now, they're much more corporate, they're a service provision, they're totally depoliticised. I mean, I am shocked on the amount of university campuses that never have political debates, don't have core meetings. I think we have to fight to make those places voices about de-investment in Israel, sexism on the campus. If something happens on a student campus, we have to take that straight and build a big union meeting to take it on collectively. So that's the first point. I mean, also just another little thing. I seem to have quite a lot of arguments about Beyonce. Yeah, I mean, Beyonce's made all these statements about being a feminist. I know she wants equal pay. I think she should. Whoever her male equal is, she should get the same as them. But what the problem is that exactly what Sarah said, the definition of what is attractive is now as narrow as it was in the 1950s. It used to be Brigitte Bardot, it used to be Marilyn Monroe, and it seems to me it hasn't changed at all. Tits and arse, that's what it's all about, isn't it? And actually, we have to fight against that. because what makes sex pleasurable is the intimacy. That's what makes sex a pleasurable experience. We want children, young people to experiment, to have more sex, actually pleasurable sex, but you have to take away the stereotype that you've got to look like that or you've got to look like that. And I think that that's where, you know, the opening up for us, you know, if we had a different sort of society and got rid of all the commercialisation, we would be free, body image would be much more positive, and people would be so much happier about themselves.
I feel a bit nervous following that now, but hi, anyway, my name's Anna. I'm probably the most least feminine trans woman you'll ever meet. So I have a first-hand experience of hanging out with men and, you know, hearing a lot of misogynist comments and things like that, and it's all described, you know, it's all just banter. It's all banter, mate, and all that sort of stuff. But the interesting thing I found was once I transitioned and I started hanging out with other fairly masculine presenting women, the same sort of comments were happening as well. And it's one thing I don't think is actually spoken a lot by women as well, because we do need to call, you know, misogynistic comments said by women towards other women out as well. And this, I think it's a very good discussion to have with other, you know, other comrades, especially LGBT comrades as well. So that's just my piece.
Yeah, I want to talk a bit about Karl Marx because he said that basically we have a system that's based on commodity production and reproduction, and with that you have a superstructure which is the institutions, like the institution of the family, and because of that you get the perpetuation of sexism and homophobia and stuff like that, and women's bodies come onto the market and are commodities. So we have things like in late capitalism, things like pole dancing clubs, pornography, the commodification of younger and younger women, basically, and female children, and this affects men and women, basically, and it oppresses women, and it leads to things like domestic violence and stuff like that. And we have to fight against sexism on campuses, sexism in workplaces, homophobia and sexism wherever we see it, whether it's in our community or in our trade union, basically, and the way we can get rid of that is through revolutionary change, because we want a society not free from the oppression of women, basically, whether it's black women, whether it's white women, whether it's trans women or homophobia, basically, and we want to see a society that's liberated, and we can't get that under capitalism. You need to have a socialist transformation of society, and that's what revolutionaries like Trotsky and Lenin and Karl Marx showed us, that basically, and their ideas are relevant today, basically. And the last thing I'd like to say is that that has to come from below. So in things like the miners' struggle, the socialists had arguments with the miners to take down page 3 and stuff like that, and they did take them down, and it was lesbian and gay miners and women that led that struggle. So we do have hope, and despite the fact that we have this massive sexism and a massive mushroom of discriminatory ideas towards women, we can get change, basically.
So I think that the patriarchy does affect men in multiple ways, you know, like wars. Men have gone to war and they've been told to fight for their women back home, and it is a big issue. But I think the way that the patriarchy affecting men has tried to be incorporated into our lives has been done so badly. My little sister, who is a feminist, despite the fact she doesn't call herself one, but we're all feminists, I can't say a single word about feminism. I can't. And I know for a fact if she let me talk for a minute, she'd believe it. And I think one of the biggest issues that needs to be addressed about the patriarchy and society right now is the lack of consent. And I'm not just talking, you know, in the way that we see all the time. I mean, it happens all the time. And I imagine a couple of you have been told by now that by a man, sorry, oh my god, I'm so bad at this, by a man that if he doesn't get to fuck you, then it really, really hurts. They were like, yeah. So my 15-year-old sister thought that too and was very, very shocked to hear that actually no, it doesn't. That's bollocks. Which is really screwed up. A 15-year-old girl thinks that. So I think the biggest issue that we need to address is consent, and that consent is really important. Yeah.
Something that I want to touch on was something that Sarah mentioned was about sexual education in schools. It hasn't been too long since I've graduated high school, and something that I remember that sexual education in high school actually had very little about sex and pretty much nothing about pleasure, which is what sex is. So pretty much a lot that I know about my anatomy and sexually and what I know about pleasure is all self-taught. And it was something that is so shocking, but I didn't realise till I was older, is that the importance of consent was not drilled into me, was not drilled into us. I was at an all-girls school, and they did not, there were so many important things that they just missed out. I can't believe that I had even been taught sexual education at school, because in my opinion, I learned nothing. Everything I learned, I researched myself, and I had to teach myself because I was curious. I want to know answers. I want to know things. I don't want to be left naive, you know? And so I just think it's so important that something needs to change in schools. This is not fair on us, on girls, to not know anything about sex and pleasure. It's ridiculous.
I wanted to come back to this question about how do we fight for women's liberation today, because I think some of the examples that we've been given about the gains that women have made are really important for us to think about, because one of the things that people have always said is that if you just have enough women, the idea of representation of women within certain areas of life, it pushes back oppression. And I just want to look at universities as a case in point, because actually women are now 52% of the student body inside of universities. That has been a massive step forward for women, actually, in comparison to 20, 30, 40 years ago, that women have come that far inside of universities. But it just shows you that even when you are 52% of the student body, they can still ram lap dancing and sexist bullshit down your throat. It's not enough just to be the big enough numbers in something. The second example I want to look at is legislation. We've had 40 years of equal pay legislation. We do not have equal pay. Okay, legislation is not enough for us in terms of our fight for equality and our fight for liberation. The other thing I want to look at is the control of our bodies. You know, we took control of our bodies much more when we had the reproductive pill, for example, that gave women the chance to actually control their bodies and control a huge number of things in their lives that came out of that. But once we had that, we were then told you now have sexual liberation, because women actually had a right to have their sexuality recognised at least. But now that's been sold back to us, and it's used as a way of whipping us down and oppressing us all the time. So I don't believe that just representation, these steps forwards and so on. And why? Because capitalism can always adapt around it. It can shape around reforms. You can push at these barriers, and that's why reformism and feminism is a part of reformism. We are not just about reforming capitalism. We are about saying that the very basis of capitalism around private property and commodification are the two veins that run absolutely through the heart of women's position in society, because we are pushed into the family, we are oppressed even if you don't have children as a woman, you are oppressed as if you do have them. And so the two things that constantly keep capitalism going, that women perform that double role of both the family and work, we have to smash capitalism to get rid of women's oppression.
Hiya, I don't think I can shout that loud, but okay, so 3 points really. First of all, because of the porn industry is very big, so how do we go about combating it? And obviously there's a response that's been like feminist porn. So my question is more like, what are your views on that, and if people sort of engage with it? Obviously now it's not as popular because it's not marketized. So if it was popular and it became a commodity, technically it could sort of help with different representation of more realist sex, but at the same time it would be sort of marketing sexuality. The second point is more, sometimes I understand that it's bad to objectify women's bodies, but also what would your reaction be to a woman who is both the subject and the object of her own body? So both agency, but then some women whether you like it or not, like to sort of be the object of sexuality, and more, especially if they choose to do that, rather than sort of get told to do that. And last thing is, I don't know, for people that live in London, there was a big fuss about this advertisement that said, "Are you beach body ready?" So, like, the story is this skinny woman, obviously has been sort of photoshopped, besides being like ridiculously skinny and like hot usually. And then they said, "Are you beach body ready?" And it was an advert for the weight loss collection, so basically the protein things that you take. Okay, so people made a big fuss about it on Twitter, and then women started sort of scribbling, graffitiing, being all like, "Oh, hashtag everybody's ready." So all of this, okay. And basically, it was a good reaction in terms of we shouldn't sexualize women's body. But at the end of the day, because of the advertisement, the company got like millions more money. Okay, so in the end, it was kind of a loss because most women actually bought the product. So yeah, how do you know?
This comrade here, followed by the comrade in the blue t-shirt.
Earlier comrade mentioned what the bloody hell are we doing in our schools with regards to sex education. I couldn't agree more, frankly. I am going to be doing a PGCE come September, and the first thing I did as soon as I knew I'd got the place, because I got told as soon as I got out of the place, I went to Costa, I got a Costa card because I need to hang around for a train for a bit. I got the internet and I looked up various bits and bobs I would need to know. One of those was the sex education document. I have never seen such a fucking dull document in my life. Jesus, I wept. There was so little on actual sex, it is unbelievable. The vast majority, about 90% of this document is abstinence. Pushing abstinence. People will constantly. It is purely scaremongering. The vast majority of this. I mean, we remember when we tried to get basic relationship education into primary schools, such as this is how a relationship works. We couldn't. It was so difficult to get anything like that past the Tories at all, and multiple Labour people as well, for that matter. This is unbelievable. The problem is, I'm going to do my damns to what I can to do to change this when I'm in the schools, but it can't just be the teachers to do this. We are going to be constantly reviewed by Ofsted and God knows how many other people. We will probably get fired, some of us. It has to come from the parents as well. All of you out there who are parents, you have to stand by us while we constantly push for actual sex education, because about the best thing, well, not the best, but the only thing I can remember from my sex education was a video of a penis erecting with a heat screen and something going in, and then something amazing happens, and then the Hallelujah chorus playing in the background. That is all I can remember. Every other bit of sex education has come from left-wing people. That is it. Sex education in schools is useless.
Okay, comrade here, and then the final comrade.
Well, I wanted to, because we never really hear about the first-hand actual effects of women's like objectification and stuff, and I just want to say it's so heartbreaking because I'm a feminist at quite a young age, seeing my friends enter into relationships and sex and seeing them think about, oh, how is the boy going to be pleased? Oh my god, I haven't shaved, what is he going to think? And stuff like that, and it's like, they just literally, they don't even see themselves. I've never heard them talk about their own sexuality, and I've known some of these for years. And also, women, we objectify ourselves. I'm constantly, no matter what situation I'm in, no matter how absorbed I am in the situation, I'm constantly thinking, how do I look? Is that a bit of hair on my face? Oh my god, what is my stance? What if I look like I'm lazy? It's ridiculous, like so many thoughts that I can never fully be myself in a situation. And I start to think, and just, I see myself as more of like from a third person perspective. I don't actually, I'm not my, women, disconnected, exactly. Women don't really have the right to be able to be their own person, be an individual, and it's absolutely ridiculous.
Thank you. I'm so sorry to everybody who put their hands up. I tried to fit as many of you in as possible. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to you all. This is our final contributor.
Yeah, I'm from Essex Uni, and I've been studying there for 2 years, and I want to talk a little bit about the sexism on campus and what we should do to prevent the rise of sexism within students' union clubs and venues and things. Because one of the problems we've got is that there is a feminist society. Unfortunately, the feminist society is not very active in the sense of it isn't involved in campaigns. The main argument in that meeting is that we should all get in a room together and discuss what sexism is and highlight how it is in the press. Now, I don't really have a problem with that at all. You know, I think it's good to educate ourselves. But then there is no next step forward to how we prevent that, how we challenge it within universities and in the outside world as well. So that's been quite a struggle in terms of intervening in those sort of meetings, and I'd be grateful for any comments or anything that can help with that, because I think it's really important we should get absolutely actively involved in these meetings. Lots of young students are attracted to them and are often put off by the fact it tends to be from more upper class students, realistically, because working class students come along and they say, well, I'm being oppressed in my workplace or whatever, and people don't have an answer on how we can tackle it. Another thing I want to say, I just want to use two examples really of how awful it can be on campuses, because it's very difficult for people to have the confidence, and I think what somebody was saying earlier about we should say no is absolutely correct, and it gives other people confidence as well. I was told if I didn't go home with somebody, then they would cut me open. Like that is the extent that it gets to. When I report it to security, they say, well, if they do it again, come and tell me. You know, that there is no seriousness around these sort of actions. And similarly, the rugby club had a song on their way on down on the coach that I know from some of the rugby women who were on the same coach, that they were singing about raping and murdering young women, burying them, digging them up again, and then raping them again. And that is a sort of level of, and that was considered as normal. And one of the women said to me, what the worst thing was that they said, don't tell the feminists, they could be getting a big fuss. And somebody said, a woman said, don't worry about that, I'm not a feminist, I can play along with this. Now, how do we challenge and bring those people and say, look, this is absolute sexism, this does not benefit you in any sort of way, it does not liberate you. Yeah. How do we intervene in that, and how do we fight and build broader campaigns with people who actually do want to put active campaigns on campuses where we're doing demonstrations, protests, strikes, petitions, because that's the disconnects that I felt at campuses. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. That was a really fantastic discussion. Actually, a lot came out from that. Now, I'll start from is there feminist porn or can there be feminist porn? And I think actually when you talk about this, it's something that comes up quite a lot. But actually, the problem with pornography is broader than who is holding the camera or really who it's aimed at. It completely shapes our expectations of what sexuality should be like. And I think instead of sitting at home and watching it, people should go out and do it. It's a massive... Yeah, all right, Jan. It's time. Pornography follows this same formula. In pornography, women do not have sexual agency. In pornography, there is literally a thing called the money shot. That's where they put all the adverts, because that's the bit people want to see. This is how much of a business it is. But I think we need to be clear as well, is that we're not against it because we think naked bodies are obscene or you know, horrible or whatever. I think what's obscene is the fact that people have to take their clothes off for money, for the bosses. It's absolutely just, you know, it's terrible. I mean, and as well, pole dancing has been repositioned as almost like a sport or a form of exercise. It's not. We need to be clear. It is part of the sex industry. If there is pole dancing clubs at universities or whatever, that is a clever move. Capitalism is dynamic. It adapts. That's completely correct. It's not a sport at all. And if it was, I don't see why women have to do it in their underwear. It's you know, this connection with profit is clear. We've probably all seen the Miley Cyrus Wrecking Ball video where she's like pretty much naked. Now this came out in the week that YouTube hits on YouTube started counting towards your position in the charts. And she was very clear about it. She said, I made that video because I wanted to make money. You know, it's very, very clear. In fact, 7 out of 10 of the most watched videos on YouTube have naked women in them. You know, it's very clear. Now, the thing about languages, the comrade that mentioned it, it's completely correct. They've adopted our language. They've took it from us. They tried to take it from us. And I am furious about it. It's disgraceful. This is the language of struggles who have fought against the system, who have fought against sexism, fought and won, by the way. They haven't given us anything we didn't fight for, the class, and they will try and take it away again. Now, sexuality is completely alienated under capitalism, and this has a lot to do with the role of the nuclear family. It's important to talk about that. The nuclear family has a specific function. It raises the next generation of workers, pretty much for free, for the bosses. That means the idea that you should be in monogamous, pretty much heterosexual, long-term relationships, that's the ideal. That has impacts on how people want to explore their sexuality. I think it is a completely, I think it's a completely, it doesn't make sense, does it, to like give a child to two humans and like put them in a house and expect them to be this atomized unit. I think these things can be done collectively. I think they can be done together. And I think actually, if conditions were changed, if we lived in a different kind of society, people would choose to live in all sorts of different ways with all sorts of people. Now, before I started today, Madeline went, "Can you explain to me why you don't like the word feisty to describe women?" Right, and this is why. Because when you describe women as feisty, or when you describe women as sort of strong women or brave women and stuff like that, it really highlights the fact that we have specific ideas about the way that women should be. And if she's a feisty woman, she's different from all the other women. They're not feisty. And, I just don't like it, because women are not feisty. Women are fighters for their class. They always have been, and they remain so today. And I think it is completely patronising to call women feisty as though they're children. And by the way, it's never a word we use about men. Yeah. Now, another running theme is that of sex education, and I think that's really, really important, because the reason why there's not much sex education is because actually I don't think the state really wants us to really talk about sex in a human way, in the way people actually experience it. The only thing we're taught in school is how to avoid pregnancy or sexually transmitted infections, and really that doesn't reflect people's experience. I mean, the thing is that actually it's capitalism that tells us sex is embarrassing. That's why parents don't want to speak to their children about it. That it's something that should be done in private, in secret. Don't talk about it. Has to be done with a long-term partner or whatever. And it's capitalism tells us it's embarrassing or shameful or dirty, and then it tries to sell it back to us in a commodified way, in a sanitised way. And I'll just finish on this. How do we fight for women's liberation today? Well, in any way we can, basically. I think the thing is, when we talk about maintaining our independent politics, that's with a view to maintaining how we actually change the world. But actually, socialists, members of the Socialist Workers' Party, are involved up and down the country in fighting for women's liberation today. Whether that's in the campaign abortion rights, whether that's campaign for single status a few years ago. We're holding debates and discussions about actually how you get rid of sexism, whether it's picketing beauty pageants or whatever, or responding to sexist comments. You absolutely need to challenge oppression in its every manifestation. It is not the case we are waiting for the revolution to get rid of oppression. We are fighting it here and now, and it is vitally important that we can continue to do so. But you cannot reform away sexism, because everything they give us, they will take away if they can do. And it is only through the process of actually changing the world, of taking it from ourselves, from the bosses, from the ruling class, that people's ideas change about who the enemy is. They see what they're up against because they're actively engaged in fighting it. And it's up to all of us as part of the working class. We would all benefit from getting rid of oppression, men and women, not just women. We don't leave it to women to fight sexism, men and women, to get rid of oppression altogether. So we need to get organised, because the bosses are organised, the capitalists are organised, and they are trying to erode the rights we've already won. But yeah, that's it actually.